July 2026 marks the 100th anniversary of the Swedish Air Force, and to commemorate this milestone, the Airfix Club release for 2026 is a pair of seemingly mismatched Swedish aircraft. I've decided to mark the occasion by building some Swedish aircraft, and so I thought where better to start than with Airfix's club release. And we're going to start with the Saab Viggen. I've already published an unboxing video to see what you get when you open up, so if you haven't seen that and you'd like to, check out that one first. This carries on from where that left off, so without any further preamble, let's see how I built this kit. According to the box and the website, the original tooling date for the Viggen was 1971. It has 67 parts, although I actually counted a few less than that, but never mind. There is one decal scheme included with this release, and I've not put down a recommended retail price because this is a club kit. If you buy it from the club, the whole package is 35 quid, just the red box element is 25 quid. I did work out that if this were released as a standalone release in the Vintage Classics range, it would probably be $15.99 in line with other historic Series 3 kits. I know that was just throwing a lot of numbers out there, but essentially it's not an easy thing to work out. Construction begins by removing various parts from the sprues with my side cutters and immediately annoying me because the interior is, shall we say, lacking. It's a seat, that is it. Now, I've built plenty of kits where the interior is just a seat, that's not a problem. What bugged me about this is that there's no logical way of actually fastening the seat into the bloody fuselage unless you're dropping it in from the top. So it doesn't really have a pin on the side, you just have half a hole on the floor and then you lean it up against the backrest. So I had to dummy fit or dry fit the other fuselage half to try and line the seat up and then just hope no glue spilled into the other fuselage half, otherwise it wouldn't work properly. The same is true of the tailpiece that you saw me gluing in there as well. Whilst that is drying, the wings can be assembled. We have two top pieces and one shared bottom piece. They go on without any real issue, although there is a fair bit of tidying up required on this kit, demonstrated by things like this, the brakes on the fuselage half, which just require sanding on all of the sides to be able to then just about fit, and then you can squeeze them in. It's not a lot of work, but it's still more work than you would get on a newer tooled or better made kit. With the inner pieces of the intakes on, I'm going to be painting the interior dark sea grey. This is a Hataka Blue Line paint, meaning it is formulated for brush painting. In terms of the colour, it was just, I'll find a dark grey that I can brush on, that will be fine. Yes, you could put in extra effort and you could try and build a bit more of an interior up, but I'm building the kit out the box, so not doing any of that. I've also painted some white on the intakes. This again was just brush painted, and that allows me to glue the outer cover onto the inner cover, if you know what I mean. This allows for the canard planes to be glued in because it covers both the intake area and the fuselage area. And I did find that at least one of these was a little bit of a difficult fit. It was always sitting at a weird angle at the top. The instructions here have no mention of weight, but weight will be required for this aircraft to sit on its undercarriage. So out comes Deluxe Materials Liquid Gravity, which is actually a lot of solids and not a force, it's an object. But anyway, that is being poured inside the nose cone. A little bit of super glue can then just be dropped in, left to set. Definitely leave it to set, do not skimp on that. I have in the past not left it to set and it goes everywhere, don't do that. Anyway, that's left to one side whilst I glue the fuselage halves together. The wing can then be glued in place as well, putting us in a position to get out the files and sanding sticks and get rid of some of the seam lines and extra plastic. So partly because of the way the parts have been moulded, the feed ends up getting in the way of these surfaces that need to be smoothed. So there will be, unless you're incredibly good at carving things with a knife, will be some sanding and probably some filling required. We've also got the wheel well bay for the nose wheel, which is moulded in one piece, so the doors are all moulded onto the floor. Not really any detail or anything, it's just a practical tool. And there's this other little piece, I don't know what they are, but they go on here and did not have any issues with the fitting. Moving on to the canopy, and yes, there are scratches on this in quite a few different places. Not ideal. Not really much I can do about it, so as long as it fits, I'm just going to mask it and ignore it, which is what I've opted to do. You can also see that I've added some green filler. This is some liquid stuff that I've occasionally use. I'm not really a big fan of adding filler. I know it's an important part of making a model, but if I can avoid it, I will. But here I don't think I could. We can now move on to the primer, and for some reason I didn't film the priming process at all. I have no idea why. But I used Vallejo white, as I am one to do, and then the main aircraft will be painted in Model Air RLM23 red. So that's right, I've gone from horrible red plastic to painting it white to then painting it red again. I find that white is a much better base for red paint, and yes, I'm aware that yellow and pink and other colours can do a job as well, but I personally prefer white. It gives you a nice bright and consistent finish and keeps the red as close to its intended look. We're going to move on to something which I missed, which is the drop tank. So the instructions show here that there is a centerline drop tank, but it's not included. There are files that can be downloaded for the printing of these parts, and I don't have a 3D printer, but I do have friends. So thank you to Matt at Model Minutes for printing out and sending me the relevant files. So I've got a drop tank here that I can carefully remove from the feeds, and the mounting point, I couldn't think what it was called then, the mounting point for it as well, which goes on the centre line. And I must say that the fit of these parts is absolutely fine, at least the drop tank to its mounting point, although it is extremely fragile, and you can see that there's a lot of tidying up needed on the tank itself, but it's extremely fragile, so I would suggest being very careful. Superglue was used to glue this in its slots, which had to be opened up because obviously there was some flash blocking the points, like with every part of this kit. In my head I originally thought I'll leave it off and I'll paint it separately, but I then realised actually no, it's better to paint it together. So I glued it on at this point and then went over it with white, a couple of coats, and then went over it with red. So kind of doubled up on work a bit. I would actually recommend just putting this on first. I've then got some model colour black. This is just brush paintable, and I've masked off the nose cone area and I'm just brushing that black. Yes, you could spray this, but if you're reasonable with a paintbrush, I don't think you're going to notice any particular difference. There is also a stripe on the top of the vertical stabilizer, which is black, so this was masked and painted at the same time as well. And off camera, I also painted gunmetal over the engine area as instructed. After a coat of gloss varnish, it is time for the decals, and look here at how they are all blended together. You've got the Tiger Moth ones kind of in a weird strip, and then you've got the decals for the Viggen everywhere else. So there's no clear divide there was used to, but for some reason in this one they have not. Anyway, the white is fairly opaque. There is always the concern that with white decals they're not really going to cut through properly. They're going to be affected by whatever's behind them, but in this case they are not. But word of warning, they are very fragile, and I think the ones here are the worst, the show must go on text on the fuselage, because the backing paper sort of just has a few gaps. So there's the O for the show, for example, there's nothing inside it, but every other letter has something inside it. And then the N as well, which is the problem I'm having here, is trying to arrange that. It again doesn't really have any attachment to the rest of it, so it's just a tiny, thin but long decal. So it took a fair bit of manoeuvring, careful poking with tweezers and a stick to try and line them up. When I tried to move them a little bit closer to where they should have been, they all just started folding again. So I just went, nope, you know what, they're on the plane, they look good enough, done. But other than that, the decals are actually really good. I particularly like these ones, which go on the nose. You've got a ghost on one side, and then you've got the badge, which also has a ghost in it on the other side. There's a lot of ghosts on this plane. It is quite a ghostly scheme. Very impressive. But these ones are just beautiful, excellent detail, superbly printed, really highlighting how good cartograph decals can be and how they can turn an otherwise quite monotone finish into something particularly special. The large ghosts on the top and bottom surfaces of the wings are also very fragile, so definitely be careful with them, and probably keep your decal setting solution at hand for just getting it to conform with those shapes. Everything has been matte varnished. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was satin and matte varnished. I mixed matte and satin together at a ratio that I just improvised, and it was fine. And we're moving on to the undercarriage, which, as you can see here, is probably the worst affected by mould seams and flash and things. Because these are small parts, you can't really easily get a knife in there to remove a lot of this, so I opted for just ignoring it. The fact that this is on the bottom of the plane anyway means I don't think it's going to be overly visible. It fits into the plane absolutely fine, as long as you tidy up the pins that go into the holes on the aircraft. But this is far from a high quality kit. Now, you may have noticed earlier that there were no hard points glued on. These were on the real aircraft. I just chose to put the Ghost decals down first, then the hard points over the top, and then paint the rest of the Ghost in white. This is much easier than trying to fold a flimsy decal over a hard point, so that's what I did. And as we now approach the very final stages of construction, I've got to put the wheels on. We have 2 wheels per leg, that's on the main undercarriage here and on the nose as well. These are fine, they're just wheels, but again you have to tidy up all of the flash and seam lines and things over them, so not the best quality, but as long as they do the job, they do the job. And the very final point is the pitot tube, which goes right here on the nose, and I'm calling the Viggen done. I have significant mixed feelings about this, so I'm going to try and be as diplomatic as possible. I'm going to do a nice compliment sandwich. We're going to say something nice first, then I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant probably, and then I'm going to round it off with something else positive if I can. So in terms of the actual building experience, this was fine. So I'm not really affected by nostalgia in the way that a lot of people are, because I grew up at a time when kits from the 70s were old and I would try and avoid them, and I never built a Viggen, this or any Viggen before, so I don't really have an attachment to either the aircraft or the kit. So when I build things, the enjoyment that I get is from mostly, well, I mean, it's from all parts of it, but I like assembling kits that don't put up too much of a fight. I don't mind having to use my brain, I don't mind having to think about the best way of approaching things, but I don't like it when I try and put bits together and I just have to remove a load of flash or do a load of sanding. It just puts me off. I would rather spend that time improving a good model rather than trying to polish a turd. And the assembly of this was fine, but nothing more than fine. That is it. It was okay. It didn't put up too much of a fight, but it did require me to use some filler, tidy up lots of parts, pretty much triple check everything. It was not a terrible experience, but nor was it anywhere near the quality I would expect from modern day Airfix. So on a personal level, putting in a vintage tool in the club kit is really just reminding me of what I didn't like about Airfix growing up rather than a positive nostalgia thing, but the kit was itself okay. This is not a bad kit, it's just an okay kit that I had a reasonably enjoyable time building. The issue that I've got with this kit is mostly the fact that it was supplied incomplete. There was no centerline tank. They provided you with 3D printed files, granted, but so what? I consider Airfix a pretty accessible brand. You can get them in lots of places. They produce kits in relatively high numbers compared with other companies. And if you have a 3D printer, great. This doesn't bother you. But how many people just want to casually chuck an Airfix kit together and happen to have a 3D printer? I can't imagine there's got to be that many. So presumably they've produced a kit that they know most people won't be able to complete as intended. So then, on that note, why have they produced this scheme? Why do this aircraft? For those that don't know, the tooling actually predates the Viggen itself in some respects because it's based on a prototype, and every time it's been released prior to this, it's been in the same basic scheme of a silver Viggen that doesn't need this tank because it's not really based on the production aircraft. Why didn't they do that? Why have they put a bright red one in? Something which the real prototype wouldn't carry, and the real aircraft that had this scheme was a slightly different shape in lots of different places. That if you just look at them long enough, you realise, oh yeah, actually it's quite notably different. So why would they just not include the normal scheme? And how is this aircraft a display aircraft from the early noughties? How does this relate to the 100th anniversary of the Swedish Air Force? It's not specific enough for it to justify being there beyond just, I guess, being a colourful plane and they can do a colourful Tiger Moth with it. I just don't get it. That there could have been better options. Why didn't they put the Draken in here? If it's just going to be, we'll do a Swedish trainer, we'll do a Swedish fighter, why not just do that? Why did they have to choose a very specific and very identifiable display aircraft that doesn't relate to the anniversary properly and is wrong because of the shape of the aircraft and the lack of a tank? It's bizarre. However, to try and end on a positive, as I said, I would. I do like it. It does look good on my shelf, although it's probably not going to be on my shelf for long. If anything, this is just motivating me to buy a better Viggen, just buy the special hobby one in this colour instead, for example, because I know it's wrong, and because I know it's wrong I didn't put in as much effort as I could have done. You know, what's the point in making it look just like the real thing when the shape's wrong anyway? It's just buy a better Viggen. Just take away from this that the Viggen is a cool plane and Airfix want you to buy a better Viggen. Oh, and by chucking it in a box with one of my favourite kits of all time, the 172nd Tiger Moth, they've just highlighted how far Airfix have come. They've put, here's what we used to do, you know, just non-prototypical nonsense, and we're just chucking in some random colour scheme with it. And here is actually a really good plane that you're going to enjoy. So again, spoiler for the next Swedish video, again, it's just a bit underwhelming. Okay, so that was ending on a semi-positive, but to be even more positive, you could like the video if you've liked it, you can dislike it if you've disliked it, and let me know your thoughts. Does the fact that it's the wrong shape bother you? Does this make sense to you? Have you just gone, well, yeah, that's fine? Do you just take it at face value and go, well, it's a red thing and I'm a member anyway, why not? Very interested to hear your thoughts, because I'm often wrong. I often think of something and go, oh no, apparently I'm wrong. Everyone else seems to disagree. That's fine. You can also become a channel member like the people appearing on screen. There are weekly spoilers, members only polls, things like that I chuck in. The more people there are, the more I can do, so if you want to join them, please do. If you don't, that's fine. Just thank you for watching to the end of the video, and hopefully I will see you again in another one, which, no spoilers if you're watching this when it comes out, the next one will also be Swedish. Hopefully see you there.